The Tennis Gambling Podcast on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is brought to you by Automatic Fantasy. Sign the promo code SGPN to score up to $250 in bonus cash. We're also brought to you by Rhythm. Get your 7-day free trial today by going to sportsgambling.com. So that's RITHMM. And welcome, everybody, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast here on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. It is currently Monday morning, roughly 8 a.m. Eastern Time on August 19th. I'm Rosso with Scott Reichel once again going solo for this pod. Should be a pretty short episode, only one match to preview. It is time for the final in Cincinnati. So we're going to preview the matchup between Tiafoe and Sinner, taking place at around 6 p.m. Eastern Time. So we're going to get into that match in a little while. Before we get into that, do want to recap what happened in the last episode, but I also want to take care of some housekeeping. Starting off with the housekeeping, I want to remind you once again to like, subscribe on YouTube. Also a reminder that you can still watch the podcast or listen to the podcast audio only on Spotify or Apple. And if you do so, please leave a rating and a review. But you can show support either way. If you're listening to the YouTube live stream or if you are listening to the YouTube video after it's actually finished being a live stream, you can still subscribe, leave a comment, leave a like. Couple ways to show some feedback and some support. Either way, though, a reminder, check out the SGPN merch store. We do have a lot of great Tennis Gambling Podcast merch. We have shirts, we have sweatshirts and mugs. And for the actual content, very, very affordable. And I do think high quality personally. I have a couple of the tennis shirts myself. Very comfortable. Recommend you getting yourself something. And we also do have a great deal right now with the actual merch store, because if you go to the merch store and use the promo code football, you can get 10% off anything in the merch store. So once again, a nice deal there for the start of football season. And a reminder, the college football actual season starts this weekend, as you have week 0 going on. Tune into the Sports Game Podcast and the college football experience for all the week 0 picks and all of your favorite futures. So getting into the actual recap of the last episode, we did, technically 2 episodes ago, we did an episode for the Winston-Salem preview as the last episode. So if you do want an extra lock and dog picks, actually those matches haven't started yet. So we do have an extra lock and dog pick, which we cannot recap because that has not started yet. So keep that in mind if you want some afternoon matches. We have a couple of them prepared for you in the last episode. 2 episodes, though, we went into the Cincinnati semis, and we got to recap how we did on those matchups, and we did very well. We got basically everything right. Starting off with the lock and dog, we ended up sweeping, so nice bounce back for us after not winning a match in the quarters. Went 0-2 on those lock and dog plays, but we bounced back with a sweep. Had the over 22.5 games in the Sinner and Zverev match at -128. Never in doubt, got there in 2 sets, went to 3 sets for fun. Each of the 3 sets had at least 12 games. Really never in doubt. Nice, easy winner there. For the dog, though, had the over 2.5 sets in the Rune and Tiafoe match at +125. That was never in doubt, too, as Rune ended up winning the first set. Then Tiafoe immediately went up a break in the second, and he won 6-1. So 2 pretty straightforward, sweat-free winners for us, and hopefully we'll get the same script here on Monday. But for the matches themselves, we got basically everything right. I said that I thought that Sinner would probably end up beating Zverev, but I thought the odds were a little bit off, and I was right. I thought that Sinner would win in 3, and he did, as he won a final set breaker. For the other match, though, I thought that Rune would end up winning in 3. That was where I was a little bit off, but damn, Tiafoe was fortunate to win that match. I'll get into the actual recaps now for the matches individually. Starting off with the Sinner and Zverev match, the real story was the one first set choke job by Zverev, because he was serving for the set, and then he ended up blowing it, and he had that butchered, I'd say, ball tracking, where he had a nice serve out wide. Sinner kind of had a stab return, and Zverev ran in, and he overran the ball. So instead of getting a slam, he ended up having to do a tweener, and you saw Sinner convert the break point, eventually did win the first set via breaker. Zverev came back in the second, won it 7-5, then ended up losing the third set in a tiebreak. Really, the story of the match, though, was Sinner's injury, and how it just seemed like he was a little bit compromised the entire match with either, I'd say, limping or just looking a little bit uncomfortable in between points. Then he started turning to his coaching staff, I'd say midway through the third set, complaining about his backhand and how he really couldn't hit any of them because it was kind of messing with his, I forgot if it was a hip issue or what exactly was going on, but the point is that his body was kind of betraying him, and Zverev still couldn't beat him. So if you want to talk about the issue I have with Zverev, and why I don't really take him seriously to win Grand Slam titles, I feel like this is a good match to discuss, because Zverev had a golden opportunity. He had a very good record against Sinner beforehand. He was 4-1 lifetime. But when you're against a guy who is, I'd say, at 70% health, maybe 60%, and you're in the semis of a pretty big tournament, you kind of have to win. And Zverev just couldn't win. And I feel like that's kind of a good summary of his career. Now, of course, he still has a lot of titles. He's won a couple 1,000 events, and I do acknowledge he's made a couple of Grand Slam finals, but it was another very close match where you feel like Zverev had an edge and he kind of fell apart down the stretch. And it just felt like Sinner took command early in the tiebreak, and Sinner was having a hard time, once again, hitting backhands comfortably, and he won anyway. It just felt like Zverev had a golden opportunity, and he let it slip through his fingertips, which has been a common theme against top-tier competition for his entire career. And I know that he was able to beat, for example, Alcaraz in the Australian Open. Then he blew a 2-0 lead against Medvedev in the semis. He's had a lot of moments, 2-1 lead against Alcaraz in the French Open. It just seems like he's going to blink when he really is in a golden opportunity to advance in, potentially win in a very important match for his career. And it just seems like he comes up short, like all the time. It just seems like it's a spot where Zverev has a very good chance to get the job done, and then he just either mentally, I don't want to say checks out, but it just seems like he lacks a certain level of mental toughness that his opponents have. And it just feels like Zverev, once again, was given a very good chance to advance, and he just couldn't do it. So either way, point is, I do think that Zverev has been showing a bit of a, I'd say, mental weakness for years at this point. It's why I've been critical of him in years past. He's just a guy that I think can definitely get to a title in the Grand Slam variety if he just improved in the mental aspect. But him and Tsitsipas, I mean, he's more mentally tough than Tsitsipas, but you get what I'm trying to say. It's just a spot where Zverev had a classic situation where it was a match he probably should have won, did not win, and we saw that against Korda as well a couple weeks ago in DC. But was that DC actually, or was it? No, that was in was that Montreal? I'm trying to remember. I think that was Montreal actually. You get what I'm trying to say. Point is, Zverev's had a couple matches recently that he arguably should have won and he lost. And it goes back to the mental aspect I've been harping on for the last couple of years for Zverev. It's why I really don't like taking him to win Grand Slams. It's because I don't trust him to actually do what needs to be done in these big moments. And more often than not, he comes up short. So I kind of saw that happen. Props to Sinner, though. It looked like he was going to potentially retire midway through the match, but he was struggling physically, and he came back, and he ended up winning. So nice job by him to showcase the mental toughness. You could argue that in hindsight, it wasn't really worth it for him because he's got the U.S. Open up next, and you could argue that he might not be healthy for the U.S. Open. There is a week off, though, in between the final in Cincinnati and the U.S. Open because, of course, he's not going to be in Winston-Salem. So he does have some time to recover. We'll see how, I'd say, he handles himself physically in the final against Tiafoe on Monday. There were some rumors that he might end up maybe withdrawing from the event, but in reality, it's the final of a 1,000 event. I expect him to be there, and Sinner, I think, is a competitor. I understand you could argue that it is not worth it in the grand scheme of things because the U.S. Open is more important. At the same point, though, if you are a competitive athlete and you are constantly battling it out against other like-minded athletes, at some point, I think pride matters. I feel like Sinner's the kind of guy who's not going to roll over and kind of quit. Now, we have seen him drop out of events because of injury, but I feel like those were in the first match or so of the event. I don't remember him dropping out of a final before. I know he had a bunch of injury issues earlier in his career, and maybe he dropped out a couple there. I remember he dropped out, I think, in a French Open match against Rublev a couple years ago. But I think Sinner has a sense of pride. I think he'll try to tough it out in the final. I don't know how he's going to look. That's kind of the question mark, but I do think that he's going to be able to show up for the event. I don't see him withdrawing and giving Tiafoe a walkover into winning a 1,000 title. I think Sinner will show up. If he doesn't feel well early, maybe he'll retire, but I expect him to be there for the actual match. See a question by Ryan, why I don't cover the WTA. I cover a couple of, I'd say, rounds, mostly in Grand Slams. I'll do an outright episode for the Grand Slams, and then I'll cover the semis and the final. Main reason, simply put, I follow the men's tour a lot more than the women's. So it's mostly about information. I am aware of what goes on in women's. I know that, for example, Sabalenka beats Swiatek. I know Pegula's in great form. She's on the verge of winning back-to-back 1,000 titles. So I'm not completely clueless in the sport. I do follow it, and I am aware of some of the players. But I follow men's tennis significantly more than women's. So I feel more, I'd say, comfortable providing information about men's tennis. So that's kind of why I don't really cover WTA. Also, just a matter of time. Having to do men's episodes, women's episodes, and the other podcasts that I do. Not enough hours in the day. So that's kind of a mix of the two, but I do follow WTA, just not as often as I follow the ATP. So that is why pretty much all my episodes are ATP-based, but I recognize the importance of covering some important women's matches like the overall semifinals and final of Grand Slams and the outright. So I am going to have an outright episode for the WTA, for the US Open, for example, but it's mostly just based on my familiarity with the ATP compared to the WTA. I definitely follow the men's tour a lot more than the women's tour. It's kind of why, but either way. Getting into the second match in the semis, you had another great matchup. Both matches in the semis went to a final set breaker. So it was an absolutely, I'd say, just phenomenal day of tennis on Sunday, and hopefully we get another phenomenal match here on Monday. But for the final match, you had Rune taking on Tiafoe. Rune won the first set early despite being really awful at actually landing first serves. Won the first set 6-4. Then Tiafoe broke Rune immediately. Rune double faulted a couple times and still could not hit a first serve. And Tiafoe ran away with it. Rune did some energy conserving, and you ended up seeing Tiafoe win the second set 6-1. Then Rune broke Tiafoe immediately. Was up 3-0. Then he was up 5-2. And you figured, okay, you're probably in decent shape. Then Rune got broken to love in the 5-3 game. With the new balls, by the way, got broken to love serving for the match. So that was definitely something. Then Tiafoe ended up having a 15-40 spot in his own service game at 5-4. So it was really what you expected. If I told you that Tiafoe and Rune were facing off against each other in a 2 out of 3 set match, that's probably the script you draw up, where both guys have some up and down sets, and you end up getting 3, which is the entire breakdown of my dog play. I just thought that you'd see both guys be streaky again, and you'd end up getting to 3. But you ended up seeing a lot of drama down the stretch, and you ended up seeing Rune once again up 5-2, only one break though. But he gave the break back in the 5-3 game, serving for the match to love, so did not win a point there. You also ended up seeing him get 2 match points at 15-40 against Tiafoe's serve. First one did not convert. Second one was insane. Tiafoe hit a net cord of all net cords, and it bounced over. 2 times, Tiafoe hit a net cord. I believe the first one was love 30 in the 5-3 game, and that resulted in love 40, and Tiafoe got the break. Then he ended up hitting the net, and it bounced over while down match point. And then after that, Rune couldn't recover. So that's how Tiafoe got by. Pretty fortunate leg cords helped him out. Now, of course, when you play enough tennis long-term, the luck's going to balance out. But to get back-to-back net cords like that in that situation in the third set, in the semis of a 1,000 event, is really rough for Rune. And Rune did enough to win the match. Unfortunately, the tennis gods decided it wasn't in the cards. But point is, I do think that Tiafoe showed a lot of mental toughness and a lot of resolve, which is something that I wanted to see. There was a part of me in the back of my mind that thought Tiafoe, once he went down 3-0 or even 5-2, was going to pack it in. And he didn't do that, so props to Tiafoe. Was a bit fortunate to actually get by those actual match points, but once he did, you kind of thought Tiafoe was going to get the job done. I thought Rune was going to implode after that. I wouldn't say he imploded, but it was definitely not easy, and then he kind of fell apart in the breaker. So nice job by Tiafoe to come back from being down in that third set. A little bit of luck never hurt anybody, except Rune in this case. But nice job by him to get the job done. In this one, I thought Rune would win in 3. I did like Tiafoe's price, and ended up seeing Rune lose in heartbreaking fashion. Either way, though, once again, 2 great matches on Sunday. Hopefully the match on Monday turns out to be a good one. Do have a little side story to talk about, which ended up happening involving a classic character and clown, Bernard Tomic. A pretty fun story I want to mention briefly. Kind of completely out of left field. It's going to be a brief segue, but I thought the story was too funny to pass up on. So Tomic, we know, has been battling in either challengers or ITF events for the last couple of years, and he kind of has had an issue with his overall mentality in tennis for years. So there was a story that was going around with Tomic in his event. So Tomic ended up losing to a guy named Andrade in the quarterfinals, right? So lost a random match in the quarterfinals. So Tomic showed up to the final in the stands wearing a disguise to boo and to heckle Andrade. That's what Tomic is up to. So he lost in the quarters, and then he wore a disguise, showed up in the stands as a spectator, and was heckling Andrade during the final. That, I think, is hilarious. I got to mention it. That's pretty funny. So Tomic, we know, has been a clown for a long time. He's an OG clown. I'm actually trying to think if the show covered Tomic. I think Tomic is already out of, really, the ATP Tour at that point. But I wanted to mention it. Just thought it was really funny, and that was kind of something that caught my eye. So if you're wondering what Bernard Tomic is up to in the world, it's losing in quarterfinal matches and then taunting the guy in the final. So I thought that was very funny. Wanted to mention that in passing. but that was definitely the fun story that sounds too good to be true, but there's video of it, so definitely a solid troll job by Tomic. You could argue he should have better stuff to do. Both cases could be true. I thought it was funny. It made me laugh. Got to mention that in passing. Anyway, time to get into the actual preview for the final between Sinner and Tiafoe. Before we get into that, I'd like to remind you once again that we are brought to you by Nordic Fantasy, because if you use their pick'em, you have a chance to win 1,000 times your entry. Or you can play fantasy football the right way with Best Ball. Best Ball Mania is live with $15 million in prizes, igniting specials and boosts on all your flex entries. I'll probably end up doing something with the WNBA moving forward, or maybe even this tennis match that we're going to talk about in a second. No WNBA, though, on Monday, so maybe I'll look into a Tuesday game, and I'll come up with a couple of options for my pick'em entry. Either way, this on the promo code SGPN to claim your special pick and first-time positive offer of draws bonus cash on Fantasy, promo code SGPN. We're also brought to you by Circus Survivor and Circuit Millions. Circuit Sports is back with Circuit Survivor and Circuit Millions, giving away $16 million in guaranteed prizes. And you could also go to Las Vegas. Don't forget that before football season, they have open contests this weekend, which you can definitely go to, which would be a lot of fun. And you can hang out with Ryan and Sean. Some of the other SGPN guys will be there as well. You can go to the open bar events, the World's Best Sports, from August 22nd through the 24th. Use promo code SGP15 to 50% off your hotel room for sign-up weekend. A reminder, if you are going to be a participant in Circus Survivor and Circuit Millions, you do have to sign up in person. To sign up in person at Circuit Sports between now and September 7th and use a proxy to play from anywhere. We deal the proxy as well. If you go to proxy.footballcontest.com, you save $50 with the promo code SGP, and you also receive a free hat. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast. Just finished recapping what happened in the semifinal matches on Sunday. Now it's time to preview the final between Tiafoe and Sinner. So looking at the actual match itself, Sinner is a massive favorite, which is really no surprise. Sinner's about minus 300. Tiafoe's around plus 250. For the over-under, you have 22.5 games. For the set actual spread here, you have minus 1.5 sets for Sinner, plus 1.5 for Tiafoe, both at minus 115. And the over 2.5 sets is a plus 155. The actual game spread, by the way, Sinner minus 3.5 and Tiafoe plus 3.5. Now, for the actual match, the question's pretty simple. How injured is Sinner? That's really what's going to come down to the breakdown for this matchup, because Tiafoe has been dropping sets. Now, I recognize how good Sinner is, even when injured. We saw him beat Zverev, who's a top 5, top 10 player in the world, despite being clearly compromised. However, I skipped him in the outright episode because I didn't trust his overall fitness going into the U.S. Open, and I was wondering if he would be 100% after he got injured against Rublev in Montreal. And the injuries have been there. Like, he hasn't looked that great. He beat Mickelson in straight sets. Was not easy, though. I think Sinner's much better than Mickelson, and that still involved a 7-5. So not exactly I'd say, fully comfortable win by Sinner in that first match. Then Thompson didn't show up. He had a walkover, so nice draw for him there. Then he beat Rublev in that wind tunnel match, which was crazy. That was a 3-setter, which was definitely competitive. And then he had whatever that was against Zverev yesterday, which was an absolute war. One of the best matches of the entire year. And he survived, despite being injured. So the question is Sinner's body going to hold up? And mentally, is he going to be fully engaged in this match when he's got the U.S. Open up next? A lot of questions. That's what the entire match breakdown comes down to, if you really want to break it down. Because Tiafoe, I think we all know, if Sinner was fully healthy, we'd probably take Tiafoe to lose in straight sets. If Sinner was fully healthy. He's not. So if you're expecting Sinner to show up at around, I'd say, 60 to 70% health, Tiafoe's got a chance. That's how I'm going to phrase it. And I could argue that maybe Sinner wouldn't be the kind of guy that would retire in the middle of a 1,000 final. Maybe. I don't think he'd walk over. I mentioned it before, but I think that Sinner will show up for the match. And I do think that Tiafoe is going to have to actually earn it, at least early on. If Sinner goes down a set and a break, and maybe he rolls over and see Tiafoe coast. But in reality, I do think that Sinner will be there, really giving it all he has. I think it's more of a warrior mindset for him. There's a sense of pride. I mentioned it before. I think Sinner just loves to compete. And I do think after missing a bunch of events early in his career with injury, it just seems like Sinner is willing to go down with the ship, and he's willing to leave it all out there on the court, which is very admirable. You could argue that it's also stupid in this actual context of the U.S. Open being in about a week. But the point is, I do think Sinner is going to go out there and try to compete. Is he going to win? This is where we're going to have a conversation, because I do think the odds are a bit off. I think minus 300 is kind of disrespectful. I understand that he's much better than Tiafoe. That history, though, has been competitive, but it's based on the injuries. And you're looking at Sinner's overall form. Yes, he still beats Zverev, but I question if he's going to be able to maintain his overall form for another potential marathon. He's had back-to-back three-setters with no days off in between, and his body is starting to deteriorate. And I am wondering if he's going to have enough left in the tank to beat Tiafoe. Now, Tiafoe's fortunate to be here. He was able to beat Rune. Once again, the net cord of all net cords saved him in the 4-5 game in the third set. Still, he came back. He had to finish the job, so props to Tiafoe for getting it done. But he's had a couple of close calls. Had to go to 3 sets against Leheshka with a final set breaker. He ended up winning that one. It has not been the easiest path for Tiafoe, but he has shown some toughness, and he was also fortunate that Hurkacz got injured in the quarterfinals. So Tiafoe's had some luck with the draw. It is what it is. I'm not going to hold against Tiafoe. You got to win the matches in front of you. So Tiafoe's been able to convert the lucky breaks he's had, and we'll see if he can do so against Sinner on Monday. I'll put it this way. If I had to pick who I think is going to win, I would link to Sinner, but I don't see any value on Sinner. Sinner being minus 300 with the injuries that he's currently dealing with are just an absolute sucker play as far as I'm concerned. He might win anyway, but there's no value at all with Sinner. I told myself if Sinner was anywhere above minus 220, I was going to blindly consider Tiafoe. And a reminder, if Sinner does end up retiring in the match after one full set's completed, most books will count your money line bets. So there's a chance Tiafoe wins the first set. Sinner realizes, why am I out here? And quits. And Tiafoe ends up winning after one full set's completed, kind of like the Hurkacz match into the quarters, where Hurkacz lost a set, realized I got the U.S. Open up next. Why am I competing when I'm injured? And you get the win anyway. So I think the value is on Tiafoe, actually, for this matchup. Is he going to win? I didn't say that, but I think these odds are not, I'd say, reflecting the current health status of Sinner. If I had to price it myself, I would have Sinner at minus 200, actually. I think he should be favored. I think he's the better player, but I think injuries matter, and Tiafoe's healthy. So I think for that case, I am going to lean to Tiafoe for the value at plus 250. Now, for the actual head-to-head meetings, which I have been kind of forgetting to mention, they're currently at 3-1 in favor of Sinner. One meeting was in the Next Gen Final in 2019. You can kind of toss that out because, in reality, that is first to 4 in each set. It's a BS format. It sucks. I'm not going to bother. So I'm going to skip that one. Faced off twice in Vienna. Faced off in 2023. Sinner won in straight sets, 6-3, 6-4. That was the most recent meeting, by the way. Faced off in 2021. Tiafoe did beat Sinner in 3. Came back from a set down there. Tiafoe went God mode and ended up coming back and winning. And they faced off in Antwerp in 2019. And Sinner did win in 3 sets. So if you want to include the Next Gen Final matchup, 3 of the 4 head-to-head meetings have not ended in straight sets. So the matches have been competitive in the head-to-head. So even if Sinner was fully healthy, yes, he's improved a lot over the last year or so. But I think Tiafoe stylistically actually can give Sinner some problems. And I think you might end up seeing him show up. We know Tiafoe tends to show up, at least for a couple sets, in these high-profile matches against top-tier players. So I think Tiafoe would give Sinner problems anyway, at least for a little while. But now that Sinner's injured, I do think Tiafoe can actually win, which might sound crazy. I'm not saying he's going to, but I do think he can make the match a war, which will push Sinner physically to the brink. I do think with that being the case, you can make an argument that there might be some value on Tiafoe for some value. I have a couple of plays that I'm going to save for the end of the show for the lock and dog. But I do think, wondering about the price, there's no value on Sinner at minus 300. Like, I can't take that price. The pricing, I'm curious what Sinner's price would be if he was fully healthy here. Like, is it factored in at all? Is it factored in a little bit? I don't know. I am kind of wondering, but minus 300 does feel a little bit steep when Sinner's had to escape against Rublev and against Zverev in back-to-back rounds. And physically, when you're looking at your coaches for the entire third round, arguing that you can't hit a backhand, I am concerned about your overall physical state going into a final. So I think the value is on Tiafoe. If I had to break it down simply, I think if I was going to go for some other options, I would consider Tiafoe plus 1.5 sets. Or if you want to go for a safer option, which is the same exact bet, but depending on the wording, one book might grade it out in one spot compared to another. Tiafoe to win a set. I don't mind Tiafoe to win a set at maybe like minus 113. It's basically the same. It's the same exact bet as a plus 1.5 sets, but some books will not actually pay out plus 1.5 sets, even if you automatically win. If Tiafoe wins the first set, some books will not pay out plus 1.5 sets if there's a retirement mid-match. So keep that in mind. Based on wording, you might want to actually go for Tiafoe to win a set instead at minus 113. And if he wins a set, you get paid. So keep that in mind. I know FanDuel had that at like minus 120. I think Sinner can win a set here. And he has won a set in, once again, 3 of the 4 head-to-head meetings. So Tiafoe historically I can't say he's had some success because he's 1-3, but he has been able to at least have success in each match in 3 out of the 4. And I think Sinner, with his overall physical limitations right now and his overall, I'd say, injury status, I do think that Tiafoe can win a set here. The crowd will be behind him because he's American. I do think that he's got a shot to win a set here, and I do think that this might end up going 3. So I am going to go with Tiafoe to win a set, and I am going to lean to the value play, which is Tiafoe to once again make the match a war. Sinner, I think, is too big of a favorite. I understand that if you still pick him to win, then you do think that Sinner, despite being at 67%, is still better as a player than Tiafoe. You're probably right. Like, I'm not going to argue, though. I think that Sinner, when healthy, is clearly better than Tiafoe, but I'm not going to back an injured player on principle in the final at minus 300. That's just not going to happen. I will not give that out. If you want to take Sinner, I'm rooting for you. Good luck. I can't do it. I think the value's on Tiafoe. I'll lean to the over in the match. I'll lean to what should be a very competitive 3-set affair, in my opinion. But I don't see any value on Sinner. You can probably find a better price mid-match if you want to. The value for me is on Tiafoe. He might not actually win, but I think 300 is a price that you will not end up, I'd say being thankful of getting over the course of this matchup. I think that, in other words, you will be able to find a better price mid-match than minus 300. I would not take that pre-match. I'd rather go elsewhere. That's going to wrap it up, though, for my actual thoughts on the match. I did save my favorite plays for the lock and dog picks, but for any of that, I do want to remind you once again that we are brought to you by Rhythm, because college football and the NFL are right around the corner, and they have you covered with some models on Rhythm. You create your own model, or you can let Rhythm do it for you. You decide what stats matter to you, and Rhythm can help you build it, or you can just use Rhythm's models, and they have a predictive model to do the heavy lifting for you. They also have projections for mental data scientists, so if you do want some projections, they have you covered for individual games. They also have you covered for NFL Week 1 and College Football Week 0, so keep that in mind. College football starts in about 5 days, so get excited for that. Claim your 7-day free trial today by going to sportscampus.com Rhythm, sportscampus.com, so RATHMM. We're also brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is now an authorized ticket marketplace for the MLB, which makes getting tickets easier and faster. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down closer to first pitch, and with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, view some receipt, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time does take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. My favorite feature is the image of seat views, because now you can avoid potentially getting scammed out of your money by paying for a seat that you think is going to be a solid one, and instead it turns out to have an obstruction in the way. That will not happen with this feature, because Game Time will actually give you a projected view of what the seat's view would be before you spend your money. So you can definitely mix and match and try to find the best view that you want to actually get while actually shopping around, which I think is a very solid way to, and a smart way to save your money and to make sure that you are getting all the bang for your buck when you are going to a sporting event. A reminder, though, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code SGPN for $20 off your first purchase. Again, terms apply. Create an account, redeem code SGPN for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast. Just finished going through the preview for the final between Sinner and Tiafoe in Cincinnati. Now it is time for the lock and dog picks. For the lock, I am going to go with a match prop. I am going to go with the tiebreak prop, and I am going to go with the under half a tiebreak at minus 141. Couple reasons why I'm going to go with this prop. First reason, there is a massive line disparity between BetRivers and other books. BetRivers has minus 141. I know BetOnline has minus 165. And DraftKings is minus 185. So shopping around, you're saving at least 20 cents, arguably 40 cents by shopping around. So I think BetRivers kind of went rogue here with this tiebreak price. I'm going to capitalize on it. Give me the under half a tiebreak based on the value alone. However, Sinner, we know, is battling an injury, and his serve has not been as dominant as it has been in the first 7 months of the year. So I do think that Tiafoe might get some break chances in this matchup. And Tiafoe, we know, will always allow some break chances because mentally his shot selection is going to be poor on various points, and he's going to give up some good opportunities. We saw him go to a breaker against Rune in the semis. Once again, pretty fortunate to get there because he should have been broken again down match point, and he was also down a break immediately in that set. So the point is I do expect some breaks for both guys, and I do think with that being the case, a breaker is kind of unlikely, and minus 141 is a good price. A reminder, by the way, if Sinner does end up withdrawing mid-match or retires, then it gets voided, so no harm, no foul there. Point is, though, Sinner's have not been involved in many breakers. Now, he went to 2 breakers against Zverev, but he's had 0 tiebreaks in 5 of his last 6 matches. So Sinner had 0 tiebreaks in 5 straight matches, entering the semis, and then the Zverev match happened. The first one was kind of lucky to get to a breaker because Sinner had to break back when Zverev was serving for the actual set. Point is, though, Sinner has not had many breakers recently, and he really has not had many breakers on hard court. In fact, Sinner's had 0 tie breaks in 13 of his last 14 hard court matches. So entering the semi against Zverev, Sinner had 13 straight hard court matches with 0 tie breaks. So the history definitely benefits the under for the breakers here. And I will also point out in the 8 career head-to-head sets, and not including the next-gen finals, which are first to 4 instead of first to 6, there have been 0 tie breaks in 8 sets. So historically speaking, the head-to-head backs this under. Sinner's recent matches back this under, and I do think 141 is a very good price, especially considering the fact that Sinner's serve might be a bit compromised. You might see more breaks. If you get a breaker where both guys break each other once in a set, it is what it is. But I don't see both guys holding 6 straight times apiece in this matchup. I think Sinner's still too good of a returner. I think that Sinner's serve might be a bit compromised, and Tiafoe's a decent returner as well. Back to history. Give me the under half a tiebreak as my lock in this matchup. For the dog, though, I am going to go with the over 2.5 sets at plus 155. Sinner's clearly playing through injury, and we ended up seeing him go to, I'd say, an extremely deep place in his mind mentally to actually get by Zverev. He showed a lot of mental toughness, but he was complaining to his coaches throughout the entire third set about his backhand and his really, I'd say, just struggling body throughout that entire set. So props to him for winning, but the point is, I do think that Sinner, if he was fully healthy, would probably win in straight sets. With him being down, I'd say, to about 60-70% health, I am wondering if Sinner does end up winning the first set and he goes down a break early in the second, would he conserve energy? Would he pull a Rune and potentially punt the set? Maybe. That's a possibility. But I do think with Sinner being below 100%, there's definitely a better chance of this match going to 3. Plus, Sinner has dropped at least 1 set in 3 of his last 4, so he has been a bit vulnerable recently. Dropped a set in his last 2 matches to Zverev, to Rublev, and to Rublev again in Montreal. So the point is he has been dropping sets. Even the one he won in straight sets wasn't easy, as Mickelson did take him to a 7-5. Tiafoe, though, has been involved in a lot of marathons recently. Tiafoe has lost at least 1 set in 15 of the last 21 matches, and he has also won at least 1 set in 17 of his last 20. So Tiafoe's been a mixed bag. He's had a lot of marathons, a lot of up and downs, which is pretty standard for his overall style of play. But the point is, I do think Tiafoe is a very good candidate to constantly get 3-set marathons, especially against Sinner. And we have seen that in history because 3 of the 4 head-to-head meetings did not end in straight sets. But plus 155 is a good price. Now, the problem that you're going to be running into is the fact that I do have to point out, if you are concerned about a possibility of Sinner withdrawing from the event, or if you're concerned about him potentially retiring mid-match, then you probably don't want to take the dog. If you are really concerned about that, you probably want to take Tiafoe to win a set instead. And that way, if Tiafoe goes up 1-0 and then Sinner quits, you still get paid out as a winner. So that's something to keep in mind. If you want to go with that approach, that's like minus 113, I think, as the best price on Bet Rivers. But once again, with the format of the show, I have to give out 1 lock and 1 plus money play. The plus money play will be the plus 155. If you want to go for the safer option, if you are paranoid about the injury, or if you think Tiafoe could win in straight sets because of how injured Sinner is, you might want to pivot and take Tiafoe to win a set instead as the play. For the sake of the format, give me the dog at plus 155. I do like the value, but if you want to play it safe, Tiafoe to win a set at minus 113, minus 120 is still a very solid alternative that follows the same script that I'm mentioning. Either way, though, once again, the plays for the final in Cincinnati, the lock's going to be on the under half a tiebreak at minus 141, and the dog will be on Sinner and Tiafoe over 2.5 sets at plus 155. Reminder, we're back once again for the quarterfinals in Winston-Salem, so not going to cover the next round. We'll be back, though, in a couple days. Until next time, though, you can find me on Twitter at Reichel Radio. Find me on the NBA show, the WNBA show, and find me on the MLB show as well. Until next time, good luck to all of you and all of your bets. Bye, everyone.